Hi, my name's Steve Allgeier and I'm with the University of Maryland Extension, and I'm going to be showing you how to plant container-grown woody plant. Before you plant a woody plant, it's best to answer a couple questions such as your soil conditions, the ultimate size and shape of the tree, and the function of the tree or shrub that you will be planting. To better help you answer those questions, the Maryland Home Garden Information Center has a fact sheet online. It's a PDF that's free and downloadable called Native Plants of Maryland, What, When, and Where. It's also known as HG 120, and it is found at the Home Garden Information Center website. Okay, now we're at the point where we need to dig the hole to place the plant in the hole. Ideally, you want to make the hole about 4 to 5 times as wide as the root mass. Seems excessive, but tree roots grow out and not down a whole lot. And ideally, especially with Maryland soils and many other soils, is the soils can be quite dense. And loosening it up for this initial planting helps that process of the tree establishing. Okay, so we have our hole. Now at this point we're ready to place our tulip poplar or woody plant, or tree actually, into the hole. And ideally what you want to do before you actually put the tree in the hole is to see how deep your hole is. And here I'm putting this tree or the root ball into the hole, and you can see just by using a shovel or a wooden stake that the hole's probably a little bit too deep. It's already going up to the first branch union. So what I want to do is take some soil and backfill back into the hole that I dug, breaking up a couple chunks and getting rid of some of the rocks. And then I want to look and see if my depth is about right. And still I'm going to add a couple more chunks of soil. Okay, so we now know that the plant is probably going to be situated at least the right height, but before I put it in the ground and I backfill it, I want to actually pull these roots apart. We had noticed earlier that the roots were girdling around the base of this tree, and ideally what you can do is break a couple of the roots, but slowly tease these roots apart. There used to be a school of thought that you could take a razor blade and cut, or a razor knife and cut 4 or 5 times along the side and across the bottom. But in looking back on trees that had been planted that way, it hadn't been as successful as they had once thought. So I've straightened out a number of the wrapping roots or girdling roots, and I'm starting to spread those out in the bottom of the planting hole. And now's the time to slowly backfill with the rest of the soil mass that you pulled out of the hole earlier. Don't worry if you get clumps of sod or grass. Grass ideally was going to die, especially if it's turned over. Now we don't want to kill our grass all over, but grass itself acts as a competition to the tree roots, outcompetes the tree roots for some of the nutrients. Okay, once you have it backfilled, you want to firm the soil up. And what that requires is just a little pressure from your foot. Maybe not directly on the base of the tree, but around the periphery of the hole. Okay, now we're ready to mulch. Mulch serves many functions for a tree or a shrub or whatever you're trying to protect, and it quite literally is protection. It helps preserve moisture in the ground. It also creates a barrier to prevent weeds and other plants from coming up that will compete with this tree. And it also will provide organic matter as it starts to decompose and break down and kind of, or slowly be drawn back into the soil. Mulch ideally should be put down at about 1 inch to 1.5 inches in depth, maybe 2 inches if you really like to put mulch down. And the one thing that a lot of people forget about when they mulch a newly planted tree is they mulch up to and against the side of the tree. Ideally, you should leave a little bare area or an area that's lightly mulched right next to the tree. If you like to mulch, don't pile it high, but make it wide. The more you can suppress and other plant growth around this tree, the better opportunity this plant has to grow and prosper. If you can, spread the mulch out so at least you create a small donut. And what I mean by a donut is a slightly raised berm around the edge of the tree What this does is it helps provide a little additional moisture, at least it keeps moisture from running out and off the mulch if it dries out, because this donut will allow moisture to slowly sit in on top of this layer of mulch and soak into the ground. Before we protect the tree, we need to take a final look at the tree and see if it's ready for life. Not all seedlings are created equally and not all of them are perfect. This one was slightly damaged, and it has some old damaged wood and it has a slight break at the top, and it's probably best if we address those by removing that. And a small pair of hand pruners, a nice pair of sharp hand pruners, we can clip out any dead wood and any broken tops back to the point where they, let's see, right there. Okay, back to the point where new growth can occur. So now we're ready to, the tree's in the ground, it's been mulched, and now we're ready to protect the tree. Many people think that trees need to be supported, but really they're finding trees that are supported or staked actually don't develop a strong buttressing root system and trunk. So what I advocate is protect it from some other critters or other problems. And these problems primarily are deer and voles. Voles are a small mouse-like creature that tends to chew on the bottom of trees, and deer, we know, just eat them from the top down. To do this, you can use a tree shelter. It's a relatively common sheltering device. You don't necessarily need to use this plastic tube. You can get hardware cloth or deer fencing and stake it around the tree. What I like about this, it's kind of a one-stop protection device that'll last many years till the tree's ready to grow on its own without this type of protection. The shelter itself is easy to install. There's one wooden stake that's driven into the ground next to the tree. Some of the times, if I know there's major roots that come off in a particular direction below ground, I try to position the stake to avoid that. It's easy to drive in a ground such as this because we had the moisture and it's relatively loose soil, but you may need to use a larger hammer to drive the stake in. The straps are nice because they're zip ties that pull firmly. And if for some reason later on, if you need to get to the tree, most of the zip ties that come with this self-release. Ideally, the shelter should be pressed down to the ground so that air currents can't draw in and blow up through the tree. That tends to create a little chimney effect that can dry the seedling out as it leaves out. And periodically, people will want to check inside the shelter just to make sure their seedling's still alive. If they aren't real sure, you can release these zip ties and draw the shelter up to look at the base of the tree or possibly pull out weeds that have developed inside the shelter.